Hey folks, this is the one and only Warwolf howling at you. Yeah, I know it's been a while. Last video I did was actually me on camera. Very rare, yes, but whatever. Anyway, here we go for the first time in better part of a year for a new edition of Wrestling Anime Whatever. Yeah, I know, it's been a while. So, a couple of things to discuss. No screenshots or anything this time. I'm not going to go making a whole big thing here out of this. I'm just not in the mood to do all the crazier things I used to do for some of my earlier rundowns of Dynamite or Rampage or whatever. Honestly, I keep forgetting that Rampage and Collision are even a thing. However, I do know that this Friday, in fact tonight, we've got a brand new episode of Collision coming on. I'm probably going to watch that simply because it is the lead-in to AEW's All Out. So first off, holy God, it's over. No more Swerve Strickland as World Heavyweight Champion. I'm sorry, I know a lot of people were fans of this guy, and don't get me wrong, I think he's a great athlete, but storyline-wise, I was not thrilled with the fact that they pushed this guy to the world title after basically having him get away with invading Adam Page's house and menacing his infant son, and then apparently admitting to stalking his pregnant wife. So I know a lot of people are going, well, wait a minute, what do you think of Adam Page going and apparently setting the empty shell of Swerve Strickland's childhood home on fire? Honestly, I'm all for it because it's basically like, I love how they basically go, oh, but that's not fair. Why is Adam Page doing this? And why should he think it? He's, walking the righteous path. It's like, literally, the idea is that Swerve Strickland tried to drag Adam Page down to his level. Well, he's got what he wants now, and this is a case of the monkey's paw. Be careful what you wish for. He wanted to show that he was going to take Adam Page's place, that he was going to become the new world champion, which he did. And again, I'm not thrilled with the fact that not only did he do all the things he did, but the fans started suddenly acting like he was a hero for doing it. Now, I'm sorry, that's just not how this should go. But it is ultimately what he did. And again, it's what the fans did, and I'm not thrilled with that as a general rule. And, they gave him the world title. I mean, if they had basically had him lose the feud with Adam Page and then go on to win the world title afterwards, that would have been one thing. I could have lived with that. Because again, Page, phenomenal talent, Swerve, phenomenal talent. They had some great matches. That big Texas death match from about I think it's a little over a year ago now, was probably one of the best matches I've seen in a while, where there's basically just no rules, do whatever the hell you want. I thought that was just awesome. And I think that the steel cage match is going to be, again, a phenomenal match, no matter what happens. I just hope that Swerve loses because he needs to. Because otherwise there's no point in continuing this feud between himself and Hangman Adam Page. So that is just a straight up, hot take on my on my part. I know a lot of people will disagree with me on that. By the way, if you hear like a buzzing or droning sound in the background, I've got my fans on. It's still incredibly hot where I live. It's in like the upper 70s, lower 80s. The humidity isn't horrible, but I do happen to live in a part of the building that basically makes this a heat sink. So if you were worried about the noise in the background, assuming you can hear it, that's why it's there. So again, we've got All Out. We've got Bryan Danielson taking on Jack Perry. That's champion versus champion. Now, as far as I know, it is only Danielson's title on the line. I don't think they're going to push Jack Perry to the world title right now. They just gave him the TNT championship, and I think that they want to at least let Danielson finish out the year with the World Heavyweight Championship. So I don't know if he's going to win the world title anytime soon, but I do think that at some point Jack Perry will be a future world champion because, again, he has the talent, he has the sheer charisma to make it work. His biggest problem is, like I said, he's got the charisma. His real problem is that he doesn't really happen to be that great of a talker. He can get his points across to an extent, but he doesn't really have the high energy that I thought he always needed. Now, I do like where they're going with him with the more soft-spoken concept that they're going with for him. The problem is, again, I'm not feeling the energy. He's got charisma, but he doesn't have, again, I feel the right energy. I'd love to see him continue to develop along the lines that he's doing, but if I'm honest, I want to see him break from the Elite and reunite with Luchasaurus. I want to see them go after the Elite and the so-called Patriarchy, which, by the way, I hate that name. But either way, I want to see Jack Perry turn on the Young Bucks and Kazuchika Okada. I want to see Killshot go back to being Luchasaurus and beat the living hell out of Christian Cage. That's my take on that. But again, do I think Bryan Danielson is going to drop the World Heavyweight title literally only about a week or so after winning it? No. God, no. The fans would absolutely just lose their shit. They absolutely would. I would. Because after basically 4.5 to 5 years of teasing the possibility of Bryan Danielson becoming the AEW World Heavyweight Champion, for them to give him the belt and then have him drop it less than a week in. Maybe, well, I think it's 2 weeks in, but either way. But to have him drop the belt that fast, no. God, no. That is just not a good idea. Not only is it not a good idea, let's be honest, it's a horrible idea. So I'm hoping they're smart enough to realize that. I do believe they want to at least have him finish out 2024 as world champion, at which point he can then go to his part-time career, assuming he doesn't retire altogether. So I really do happen to think that Bryan Danielson will at the very least make it to the end of the year, maybe even the start of 2025 as World Heavyweight Champion. So there's that. Next, I believe we've got, I believe it's 2/3 of the BCC, well, half of the BCC if you count Jon Moxley, and I'm still trying to figure out what's going on with him, but that's a whole other thing. Anyway, Claudio Castagnoli and I might be butchering that. I think it's Claudio Castagnoli, but somebody in the comments let me know if it's Castagnoli or Castagnoli, because again, I've heard it pronounced both ways, and I'm not really sure which way it is. Again, I've also got a partial hearing loss in both ears, so I could even be mishearing the name altogether. I just know how it's spelled, which doesn't help much when the name comes from another language. Anyway, we got Claudio and Wheeler Yuta challenging the Young Bucks for the World Tag Team Championships. That'd be interesting. They are currently 2/3 of the World Trios Champions with Pac, which I have to admit I was a little surprised. I was wondering what had happened to the Lucha Brothers. Now that's Rey Fenix and I don't even know what to call him at this point. He's gone by Penta El Cerro Miedo, Pentagon Jr., Pentagon Dark. I think he's been known by a few other names. I've just been calling him Pentagon for years, and a lot of people, at this point just call him Penta. Even sometimes I'll call him that. A friend of mine told me that he thinks they might be going to WWE or at the very least NXT. If that is the case, I'm a little upset about that because Death Triangle is probably my favorite trios group in AEW outside of any combination of the 4 men that make up the BCC. But to be fair, I kind of feel like Pac would fit in the Blackpool Combat Club. He would also be the only Brit that's actually in the Blackpool Combat Club at this point. Because I'm pretty sure William Regal has gone back to WWE if he hasn't just out and out retired at this stage. But it'd be interesting to see if we could see a unification sort of the World Tag Belts and the World Trios titles, because I don't think that's happened before. So there's that. Mercedes Moné, a.k.a. Sasha Banks, for those of you who know her from WWE or have not yet watched AEW and are wondering who I'm talking about, if you know Sasha Banks, you know Mercedes Moné. From what I've been able to understand, she's a complete ratings killer. I'm not surprised. She bores the hell out of me. I'm sorry, this CEO thing, I don't know what this is supposed to represent. I love the fact that people hate her basic concept so much, they literally have to pipe in the chant as part of her music. I'm sorry, she's boring. I can't stand the multicolored hair thing. I mean, to be fair, she colored her hair an absolutely gregarious shade of red back in WWE, but at least it was consistent. Here it's just a rotating color of, or excuse me, a rotating, what's the word I'm looking for here? A rotating cycle of absolutely garish colors that do nothing but cause my eye to water. And yes, I said I in the singular. I've only got one that works. Was born that way. Anyway. Yeah, I'm sorry. She bores the hell out of me. I wasn't the biggest fan of her in WWE either, but I could at least tolerate her. Now in AEW, they basically pushed her to the second major championship they have for the women's division. And I'm just not a fan. I preferred Willow Nightingale. I do like her. She's hilarious when she's allowed to be. I believe she currently has the CMLL Women's Championship. I know it's some title from Mexico. I believe it is the CMLL title. She's still entertaining, and I would love to see her regain the TBS title. Right now, she's feuding with Chris Statlander. Okay. Moving away from the women's division, we have the so-called conglomeration. These guys are hilarious. I'm sorry, these guys are absolutely hilarious. Mark Briscoe, I mean, again, I'm absolutely, brokenhearted over the death of Jay, but, you got to admit that in the roughly 1.5 to 2 years since, Mark has really come into his own, and it's still weird to call somebody else by that name. Granted, his is spelled with a K, so whatever. Anyway, Mark Briscoe has really come into his own. I'm absolutely over the moon for him winning the World Heavyweight Championship. It means now that both of the Briscoe brothers have held that title. He's absolutely hilarious. Kyle O'Reilly is kind of funny as well. I love how he plays off of him. Orange Cassidy he's just got that weird deadpan humor that just fits so well with this group. And somehow Willow Nightingale has kind of gravitated to them, and again, she fits, so I love it. And then they added Will Ospreay this past week. Now, I believe they had a losing effort, if I remember right, which I'm kind of sad about, but either way, not bad. Speaking of Will Ospreay, he regained the International Championship. I do like the idea of the American Championship, so I'm hoping they will... they could even have that revived and have MJF just basically say, okay, well, he didn't accept the American Championship, therefore I'm still the American Champion. And I know you might be saying, well, wait, why even bother with that? It's like, why not? They've got, like, what, 8 titles? 9 already? Just in the singles division for AEW? I mean, if you count the Ring of Honor stuff, I mean, yeah, it's right around there. Because you figure you've got the AEW World title, the TNT Championship, the International Belt, the FTW Championship, the Continental Championship. Then, from the Ring of Honor side of things, again, it's owned by Tony Khan, so he owns both companies. This is why they're constantly doing crossover. You've got the Ring of Honor World title, the Ring of Honor Pure Championship, and the Ring of Honor World Television Championship. So, I mean, if you add the wow, okay, that somebody slapped me. If you add the American Championship into the AEW side of things, yeah, I mean, this would absolutely, be par for the course at this point. Because they already have something like 8 championships. Just in the men's division. So, again, personally, I say bring back the American Championship. I liked it, although I'm not thrilled with the whole American flag with Max's head as the stars. I mean, to be fair, it fits his character as a heel, but okay. On the subject of Maxwell Jacob Friedman, let me just say right now, him versus Garcia is going to be a good match, but I'm not thrilled with the heel turn. I think it's too soon, and they brought him back as a face. I loved him as a face because it made perfect sense for him to come back, because they had turned him face with Adam Cole, and then Adam Cole forms the Undisputed Kingdom. Max gets injured, or whatever happens, I think, during the course of that storyline. Adam Cole was also injured. In fact, I think he's still out on injury, which is why we haven't seen him in a while. And does anybody know what happened to Wardlow? Anyway, so MJF is back. Adam Cole is still potentially out on injury. Okay, fine. Keep him as a face. Have him basically run through the Undisputed Kingdom with the ultimate goal of getting his hands on Adam Cole. That storyline writes itself, and I'm really, really disappointed, honestly, that they dropped the ball here. Because, yeah, to my personal viewpoint and opinion, they dropped the ball badly with this. Now, don't get me wrong, MJF can play a heel beautifully. He does very, very well at it. He practically excels in the role. And he can make you hate him, which a good heel is supposed to do. You're supposed to love hating the guy, and you want to see the heel get his ass beat. Max plays that to perfection, but he's surprisingly good as a face. And they had teased that in the past. Apparently he still gets massive pops in Long Island, which is great for him, I would say. Again, I don't think they should have turned him heel so quickly after bringing him back, which, again, they did, but I don't think they should have. I think he, again, was doing very well in the face role. If they had played out the idea of him basically taking out every member, basically, of the Undisputed Kingdom, and then had him, go after Adam Cole, I think it would have played out perfectly. And ultimately, yeah, I think they dropped the ball here. And whether or not they will go back to potentially trying to turn him face at some point, I don't know. It might be too soon at this point after the most recent heel turn. But, I mean, at this stage, they do still need to pay off Adam Cole versus MJF. They need to do this. They need to have Max get his revenge. I'd love to see him do it as a face. I just don't know if they will do it. I'd love to see them do it. I don't know if they will. Danny Garcia, right now, he's playing the storyline that MJF should have been playing with the Undisputed Kingdom. He's come back, he's looking for revenge. MJF is the villain, and he wants to take him down. This is what we should have been seeing from MJF and Adam Cole, even if it meant basically utilizing the Undisputed Kingdom as basically a stepping stone to that while Cole is out on injury. Again, just my personal take. You're free to disagree if you want. I know Jim Cornette will probably have his own thoughts on what's going on. I got to remember to check out his videos on YouTube later. Been a while since I've watched. I'm not even sure if he's still doing them. But either way, I know people have their own thoughts and viewpoints on MJF as a heel. Some people love him in that role. Some people hate him in that role. Some people love him as a face. I'm perfectly fine with either one. I just think it was too soon to turn him heel again because, again, he's got unfinished business as a face. We'll see what happens. Moving away from live-action pro wrestling, very briefly, for those of you who are not aware, I've seen this over on Netflix. There is a Kinnikuman 6-part OVA. It might even be more than that. I don't know. I was not a big fan of it. I took a look at this thing, and ultimately, I think what took me out of it was just how bizarre they got with some of the designs. Now, I've seen the sequel series to the original Kinnikuman, which was Ultimate Muscle, the Kinnikuman Legacy. Now, granted, that's the dub for whatever the series is called in Japan. Maybe it was called Ultimate Muscle in Japan, I don't know, but it was a direct sequel to the original Kinnikuman, which apparently did get a lot of, like, less than an inch tall figurines here. I did not know this for the longest time, but whatever. Anyway, not a fan of this, but at the same time, I mean, it's nice to see wrestling get some love in anime because there isn't a lot of good wrestling anime out there right now. I think the two that we have that are even halfway decent are Wanna Be the Strongest in the World, which focuses on women's pro wrestling, which is kind of interesting. And Tiger Mask Double, which is rendered with the letter W. They've done that a couple of times, actually, in Japan with stuff like this. Kamen Rider Double, for example, is rendered with a W. Now, I will say this. I did like that they were able to work with New Japan Pro Wrestling for Tiger Mask Double, but I will say this. I wish they had been more accurate with a lot of the wrestling, because a lot of this felt more like martial arts just dressed up in a wrestling skin. I didn't see a lot of actual wrestling moves in Tiger Mask. Now, to be fair, that may have been because they don't really know how to animate the moves as well as they probably could. And Toei basically, I think, did the best they could with what they had. I don't necessarily know that it was the best thing in the world. Let's be honest, it kind of wasn't. But to be fair, it at least was somewhat, I stress somewhat, realistic by comparison to Ultimate Muscle or Kinnikuman. Now, I've never seen the original Tiger Mask. I really would love to at some point. Unfortunately, it does not exist on streaming on Crunchyroll or even High Dive. Yes, I've tried that, by the way. High Dive is pretty good. I just, for the moment, I don't really have anything I absolutely want to see there, so for the moment I've temporarily halted my subscription to that, although once I finally get around to getting a Roku TV, I'm getting that. Just for the fact that there is a good amount of anime on there, and I'm sure I'll find something else I want to see other than the stuff that I've already plowed through. There is another series, Tiger Mask 2, which Tiger Mask Double effectively ignores. Because as I understand it, the original Tiger Mask, I think, gets murdered in that one. Anyway, yeah, other than these two, I haven't seen a lot of wrestling anime. Now, Wanna Be the Strongest in the World, at the very least, did try, I think, to get a little bit more actual wrestling moves in there and animated, and I'll give credit where it's due. It looks like Ultimate Muscle may have directly inspired a real-world move. Kid Muscle's Muscle Buster, and that might even be from the original Kinnikuman as well. That move, if it did originate with Kid Muscle, then yeah, that's kind of interesting. But if it came from the original series, either way, I'm impressed that an anime inspired an actual wrestling move because it was legitimately doable in the real world, which is rare, honestly. Now, moving from wrestling-related anime to just pure anime, we've got a couple of decent ones I would like to recommend for the past, basically, couple of seasons. If you have Crunchyroll, I mean, this is going to mean more to you because, well, right now everything I'm going to be recommending for the most part is from Crunchyroll. So first off, a new series that I've been following. It's a little weird. I think they're using some CGI rigging for this, but if they are, it's very minimal. And that is Failure Frame. Now, it's got a longer name overall, but I'm just going to call it Failure Frame just because that's the easiest part to remember. The idea is basically it's an isekai, but it's got a few oddball twists. And it is something of a revenge anime as well. So, in that regard, it kind of follows in the footsteps of Rising of the Shield Hero, which, by the way, I do think needs to get a full adaptation. The full 22 books have been released in the US. Yes, there's 22 volumes. It's apparently cut down quite a bit from the original web novel. But, yeah. The full series is out in the US. You can read the original, well, not the original, but you can read the light novel. And there's also, I believe there's a manga adaptation, which does its own thing. To be fair, both of these are adaptations of the web novel, which apparently they made severe changes to in order to make things a little bit more palatable for the light novel audience. The anime is not bad, although it does compress quite a bit after the first book. Actually, the first season covers something like the first 5 books. So, that's kind of impressive. But Failure Frame is kind of... it's similar in that, again, it's an isekai with a revenge twist. But basically the idea here is an individual who's supposed to have the weakest magic out of an entire class of school kids, probably like late teens, so probably like right near the end of their high school career, basically gets pulled into another world by this very vapid goddess character. I think that's more of an act than we've seen yet. I do think there's something more going on there. I think she's actually... This isn't a spoiler because it hasn't been confirmed, but based on the way she behaves, I think she might actually be the villain overall of the series. She's done some really, really, crappy things over the course of the season so far. So I do think she is going to be revealed as potentially the villain. She tests all these kids and I guess their teacher for magic abilities, and the lowest ranked magic user, who is of course our main character, basically is told, yeah, you're useless, so we're sending you to this dungeon. What are they called? The Ruins of Disposal was the name of the dungeon. And if you happen to get out of there, you're free to live as you want. But yeah, basically she tried to kill him. For no other reason thus than, he had a low initial power score. So he does survive. And turns out to have some impressive magic. Which allows him to do some pretty crazy stuff, really. And then he basically decides to go out and seek vengeance. And in seeking vengeance, he is joined by an elf. Two elves, actually. An elf, a dark elf, and a leopard man, who is actually a leopard woman, and probably my favorite character in the show so far, Eve Speed. Yeah, the name's a little goofy, but I love her personality. She's basically what if every single heroic knight character you saw in anime also had a hidden bloodthirsty side, but only when she's fighting. The rest of the time, she's cool, calm, and collected, and honestly kind of snarky at times. So, I mean, again, that's just my read on her. Maybe it's just the way her tone sounds with certain things that she said. But, yeah, I like her. She's interesting. She's funny. Saris Ashrain is the first elf we're introduced to. Yes, her name is Saris, as in Saris Victoria from Hellsing. I don't think that's intentional. That could just be, it's not an unheard of name in Japan for certain characters, I don't think. I think she just might be only the second major anime character I've heard with the name. I'm sure there are other characters who have that. I'm sure there are other people who actually have the name in real life. Maybe. But, who knows. There's also a younger dark elf character named, I think they're calling her Lise, like short for Elizabeth, Lisa or something. I don't know. So basically our main character, whose name is, crap, I can't even think what his name is off the Tuka. Something or other Tuka. Tuka, something like that. So he's looking to find a form of magic that can defeat the goddess who basically tried to have him killed. And he's found a spell book that might enable him to unlock magic that would let him do this. Oh, by the way, I almost forgot. One other member of the party so far is a small slime named Piggy Maru. And our main character is the one who picked out the name. Go figure. So yeah, Failure Frame I recommend. Another one I will recommend, Wistoria, Wand and Sword. I might be misremembering the other half of the name, but Wistoria is pretty decent. It's basically your standard school kid in a fantasy world kind of situation. Think Naruto meets Fairy Tail. I'm not even sure. I might even be thinking of Fairy Tail. I might be thinking of Black Clover. Whichever anime it is with the kid who basically couldn't do magic, and it turned out he could do anti-magic. The idea basically is kid who seems to have no talent for one specific thing, in this case magic, happens to have prodigious physical skills, and is basically a combatant so impressive that he basically doesn't need magic because between his analytical abilities and his sheer physical prowess, he's basically on par with some of the highest level students in his school. His ultimate goal is to reunite with a childhood friend who was effectively elevated to one of the highest levels of society. So it's a little bit interesting, a little bit cliche, and ultimately, you know, it's a good blend. It's a good mix, at least for me. Now, the other one that I will recommend for this season is a little odd, and I may be butchering this title. The Osan Adventurer begins his quest after 30 or something. It's something like that. It's Osan Adventurer. Ossan Adventurer. You can find it on Crunchyroll easily enough. The name of the guy is Rick Gladiator, although they render it as Gladiator. And I think this is largely because there is no real L sound or R sound separate in Japan. They're effectively utilized for the same letter. Excuse me, the same sound is used for different letters. This is why, for example, if you look at certain illustrated books about Japan, you'll see, for example, at a hotel, you might see key drop rendered as key D-L-O-P because the two letters are effectively represented by the same sound. Weirdly enough, I believe this is also true for the letter V, because Vegeta and Videl have also been represented in the anime for Dragon Ball as Bidel and Vegeta when pronounced. Videl might actually be named Bidel. I'm really hoping that's not the case, because if it is, it's a pun on a really, really disturbing level, I guess. I mean, that's literal toilet humor. But either way, just a thing there. So anyway, Rick basically lives in a fantasy world, and he decided late in life, or rather late in his early half of life, that he was going to quit his day job as a clerk at the Adventurers Guild and become an adventurer himself. He manages to befriend a group of high-ranking adventurers who train him to stupid levels, and he is now basically, you know, running around with them. His ultimate goal is to defeat some weird creature that is believed to be mythological. We don't know if it actually is mythological or not yet. The group that he's been trained by seems to be absolutely of the belief that it's real. So we'll see what happens. The series is just really getting started. I think they're like 8 episodes or 9 episodes in. So a lot of seasons right now in Japan seem to be only around 12 to 14 episodes, depending on the series, which means we might get more material later on if they do well enough in Japan. But those are the 3 major ones I would recommend right now out of the modern stuff that's just come out within the last basically year. At least this past, spring and summer season. So that's pretty much all I got there. Moving on to movies. Remember, folks, this show is called Wrestling, Anime, Whatever. Now we're in the whatever part. So moving on to movies. I have not been to too many in the last couple of years. There are a few I have been to. Of course, Loved the Super Mario Brothers movie. We've talked about that here in the past on this channel. Obviously, I went to go see Godzilla and Kong: The New Empire. Loved that. I have it on Blu-ray now. I don't remember what the last movie I actually went to see was. Actually, what did I went to go see something after Last Voyage of the Demeter, which, by the way, other than Liam Cunningham as the captain, was just stupid. I'm sorry. I can't remember what the last major movie I went to see was off the top of my head. Which should tell you just how rarely I go to see the movies. I am planning it, if it's still playing at some point, to go see Deadpool and Wolverine, because I've heard it's pretty good. I'm on the fence about Transformers 1. Simply because, I mean, yeah, Orion Pax in Generation 1 was depicted as a little bit more casual in his speech. But a lot of what they're doing, a lot of what they're setting up in this movie does not feel true to the Transformers. So I get that it's an alternate reality. They're trying to take a little bit of everything. I think they're leaning heavily on the material they were going to use for the so-called aligned continuity. But that aside, it doesn't really feel right. The guys they got playing Optimus and Megatron, I forget who's playing Megatron, but they got Chris Hemsworth. They've got Thor playing Optimus Prime. More specifically, they got him playing Orion Pax. I could almost see that, but I'm sorry, it's just like, I would have loved to have seen Peter Cullen return as a, for the animated feature film. I mean, even if it was only just to be once he got to the point of being Optimus Prime, that they bring Peter Cullen in for that, because, I mean, they did that with War Dawn in the original series back in, 1985? 1985, I think, was the second season. Either way, they are making some very interesting changes to the continuity here. So, again, this is an alternate reality. Hasbro has basically established there is a Transformers multiverse, and all of these are theoretically true. So, yeah, I'm clipping my toenails. If you have any issues with that, I don't care. It's got to be done. My toenails are getting overly long. Anyway, the film, the CGI isn't horrible for what it is. I mean, I've seen better and I've seen worse. Again, I'm not sure how I feel about the film as it stands, so I may wait until this comes out on DVD or Blu-ray and pick up the thing from the library when it comes out and see it then. I'll have to take a look. Again, I'm not really a fan of them overhyping Bumblebee. I get it. He got stupidly popular as a result of the Michael Bay films, which, again, fine. But I'm sorry, it's just I think he's overplayed. Elita 1, whom they're just calling Elita in this case. Okay, she's there. She was supposed to be Optimus's girlfriend back in Generation 1. I don't know if they're going to continue with that, as IDW did not do that, for example, which I thought was kind of an odd choice, but okay. Megatron, the one thing I'm very, very iffy on is that it seems like for his color scheme, they went with his early Marvel, well, actually his only Marvel depictions, which may have been based on early concept art for the character, where his helmet is like a dark gray, almost black, whereas in the original cartoon, which a lot of people are more likely to remember than the Marvel comic. I mean, the Marvel comic, they use that same color scheme for his head, whereas the rest of his body was like a silver white. They went with the darker helmet. I'm not sure if that was the best choice. I get that, again, they're blending elements of the different continuities here, which would explain that. But I'm not sure I'm the biggest fan of it. The other thing I'm really not sure about, and I kind of happen to be not a big fan of, is the idea that the Cybertronians are primarily seemingly living underground. That doesn't make a lot of sense. And then there's the issue that apparently Optimus, Megatron, Elita, and Bumblebee can't transform? Apparently they don't have transformation cogs, or T-cogs as they later went with for Transformers Prime, which weirdly enough was called the conversion cog in Transformers Fall of Cybertron. Go figure. In any case, that I'm very much not thrilled with, but if they can find a way to justify it in the movie, I could probably let it go. That means we've only got one thing left to talk about, and that is, at least in terms of films, the trailer for the new Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. I'm going to tell you right now, skipping this movie is probably in everybody's best interest. I know I absolutely am. I think the last Disney movie that wasn't Marvel related that I ever went to see probably was Zootopia, which I've heard they're supposedly getting a sequel to, but I'll believe it when I see it. So yeah, that was the last Disney movie I went to see in theaters. It is also the only non-Marvel film I have ever gotten on Blu-ray, outside of the original, let me put it this way, it's the only modern Disney movie outside of Marvel that I've ever gotten on Blu-ray, or DVD for that matter. So, yeah, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, it's like pretty much 99% of all the other Disney remakes, it's going to suck. I don't even need to see it to know that, because in general, now I haven't gone to see these in the theater, but I have seen them occasionally when they've popped up on TV, or, decided I wanted to torture myself and borrow them from the library. The Disney remakes suck. There's a reason that the animated Disney canon, basically up until maybe 2007, are considered classics. And even then, I mean, it might not even be 2007, but like the last real major Disney film that I personally liked before Zootopia probably would have been Treasure Planet. Laugh at me if you must. I liked it. Okay? I liked it. I didn't hate the original Tarzan, although I thought it was odd as a stylistic choice. Did not like Frozen. Wouldn't go anywhere near Frozen 2. I mean, the music was alright, but the story was meh. I mean, if they're gonna fucking do the Snow Queen, god damn it, do the Snow Queen. Don't do this weird. Well, I mean, to be fair, they've made a lot of changes to the existing fairy tales anyway. So, yeah, whatever. I guess you can't really complain about them doing that with the Snow Queen when they've done it with every other, fairy tale they've ever adapted, so. But yeah, no, Rachel Ziegler, from the very outset, seemed like she was determined to tank this movie. I mean, she's basically deriding the original film from 1937. This was the film that, let's be honest, made Disney. If this had failed, excuse me, if this movie had failed, I don't think that Disney would have. One second, folks. If this movie had failed in 1937, I don't think Disney would have been nearly as big as it got. I'm not sure if it would have been that big at all. Without that original film, there is no Walt Disney Company. And Walt Disney would just be another, obscure, if talented, animator who would have, basically faded away with the times. Lord only knows the company itself is trying to basically whitewash him out of existence. But yeah. So, Rachel Ziegler basically... I'm sorry. They cast her as Snow White. And I'm going to agree with a lot of other people, including the majority of the panel that was on one of the more recent episodes of Piers Morgan Uncensored. By the way, Piers, if you ever get a chance to listen to this, and I'm not sure you will, but if you do, I love watching these panels that you do. Some of them I agree with, some of them I disagree with. There are a lot of people that you bring on that half the time I want to slap, and the other half of the time I'm more or less okay with. Oh, and Piers, just, this is a minor aside here. As a Jewish man myself, please stop inviting that one weird rabbi onto your show. He's just making every Jew in the world look bad. By the same token, though, I also want you to stop bringing on Cenk Uygur, because the man is a racist asshole, as far as I'm concerned. Now, speaking of racism, this is something... I'm having a late lunch. Anyway, this is something I can unequivocally state that Disney is indulging in here with Snow White, because the reason the character was called Snow White was because she was an extremely pale-skinned young woman in the original fairy tale. The idea was that she had skin white as snow, hence the name Snow White. Now, the story was also about the desire to achieve true love. Rachel Ziegler, I don't know if she's Hispanic or what, don't care. I don't know if she's tanned or if she's just naturally, looks like an almost olive color to me. But she doesn't fit the physical description for Snow White. And I'm sorry, she's not particularly attractive. Meanwhile, you have Gal Gadot, who played Wonder Woman, and is arguably one of the most attractive women on the planet, if not, within like the top 10, at least in terms of like actresses, at this point, in terms of looks, as the evil queen, and she's supposed to be jealous of Snow White. Yeah, I'm sorry, no. I don't buy that at all. Now, the idea was supposed to be, obviously, that the Evil Queen was, of course, relatively beautiful, but she was also extraordinarily vain in the original fairy tale and the original Disney film. But, yeah, I'm sorry. When you literally have somebody who looks 10 times better playing the Evil Queen, and you're basically going, she's supposed to be jealous of somebody who, A, doesn't really look that attractive, and B, has flat out said she hates the original movie. I'm sorry. This is a hashtag boycott Snow White moment. I'm just putting that out there right now. Hashtag boycott Snow White. I honestly cannot recommend enough that everybody skip this movie. Not just because nothing about the way the casting is done makes sense, but then you get to the issue with the dwarves themselves. First off, Peter Dinklage really kind of just slapped every other, little person in the face with his behavior. So, for those of you who don't know, Peter Dinklage basically made his bones in Hollywood basically playing dwarf actors. He literally rose to prominence, for the most part, in Game of Thrones as Tyrion Lannister, whose entire character revolved around the fact that he was resented for two major things by his own family. One, the fact that when he was born, his mother died, and B, he's a dwarf. As in, he has dwarfism. Peter Dinklage would then go on to, I think it's Days of Future Past, playing as, I believe it's Bolivar Trask. So he wasn't he wasn't basically playing a character who was supposed to be a dwarf. He was playing against type there, because again, Trask was a normal-sized individual. Did not have dwarfism. He wasn't overly tall, but neither overly short. But in this case, they just went with, Peter Dinklage in that. But Dinklage literally basically pulled up the proverbial ladder behind him when he spoke out against the idea of casting real people as the Seven Dwarves. And that's really kind of a slap in the face to pretty much everybody else who could, in fact, do this kind of thing. Because they were, in fact, little people. So, Disney initially decided they were going to do, I think it was going to be Snow White and the Seven Magical Creatures or something. Then they turned it to a cast of quote-unquote diverse individuals who were supposed to use magic or something. So, whatever. And then they finally just said, okay, we'll do dwarves. But then they gave us CGI monstrosities who are almost as tall as Rachel Ziegler. Let me remind you that the dwarves in the original film are shorter than Snow White. Snow White herself, which, by the way, now this is the one thing, I believe they aged her up for the movie, which, to be fair, I can understand that. Snow White was somewhere between 13 and 16, I think. And I think she was on the younger end of that in the original movie. So, again, I'm not sure of her exact age, but she was still relatively young. And the dwarves, who are fully grown, are smaller than she is. She's maybe 5'3", 5'4". They're at most maybe between 3'10" and 4'5" in the original film, I think. And some of them look like they are almost as tall as she is. And in one scene that we've seen clips of, or at least screenshots of, where she's apparently sitting down, several of these things are towering over her. So, yeah. That's just really, really not kosher, to coin a phrase. Add in that Disney has basically gone with the idea of, she's basically freeloading in the dwarves' home, and after they're done in their mines, which is what they use to make a living, because they mine diamonds, she basically bosses them around in their own home, basically making them, upkeep their own place. Now, to be fair, I think they already were doing that prior to her arrival, but she's basically freeloading, and she's basically now running their lives. So they tried to quote-unquote girl boss this bullshit. Yeah, I'm sorry, no. No. That's an extremely ungrateful character. She's being allowed to live there for free, and she's doing nothing to earn her keep in the house. She's not cooking, she's not cleaning, she's not doing any kind of work. The dwarves are doing it all, and she's just bossing them around. And let's remember, folks, this is supposed to be a character who's dreaming of the leader she knows she can be. That's Rachel Zegler's words. Instead of being interested in finding somebody that she can connect with and have a relationship with, which, by the way, was what the original Snow White wanted. She wanted to find somebody that she could have a connection with, because remember, she was not yet at a point where she needed to take the throne. She wanted to find true love because she wanted to have that connection with another person. Meanwhile, here, Rachel Zegler says that this is a film for a modern audience, and Snow White is dreaming of the leader she knows she can be because she's the fairest one of all. And it's like, really? You basically invade somebody's home, get them to agree to let you live there basically rent-free, don't do a damn thing resembling work in the home, and instead you boss these 7 men around. Why do I want to see a movie about this character exactly? I'm sorry, it's just, why am I supposed to care about this version of Snow White? Why am I supposed to believe that this version of the evil queen would ever be jealous of this version of Snow White? Why would I believe that the dwarves wouldn't just throw her out on her ass if she's going to boss them around in their home? And more to the point, why do I ever have any reason to want to see this movie? Now, to be fair, I'm not a big fan whatsoever of the majority of the Disney remakes. The lone exception to that being The Jungle Book. Although, to be fair, I do prefer Warner Brothers' Mowgli by comparison, so that's just me. Anyway, the majority of the Disney remakes are god-awful. But I would take any one of them so far, for the most part, over this version of Snow White any day of the week and twice on Sundays. I'm sorry, there's no other way to put this. This is just beyond stupid. It is absolutely beyond stupid for them to want to do this. they're basically trashing their own legacy here. Rachel Ziegler is helping them do it. I can't, for the life of me, understand how or why anybody would ever go see this. Now, there are people out there who will go see this no matter what just because the Disney name is on it. Okay, fine. You're wasting your money. And I'm sure even you will have to agree this is going to be dumb, but you won't say that because you just are looking at the film through rose-colored glasses. I'm sorry, this movie is going to be trash. Rachel Ziegler has done nothing to make me want to see it. The trailer absolutely horrifies me. Yeah, again, I'm going to quote one of the most recent panels on Piers Morgan Uncensored. In fact, it was put up today. I know I'm going to butcher her last name, so Esther, I'm sorry. Esther Karuk. Again, I'm probably butchering this. Again, I apologize. She called the dwarves what they are, CGI abominations. Honestly, we could have had actual dwarf actors. I see no reason we couldn't have, other than Peter Dinklage screwed it up for everybody else. Now, one of the guys who actually came out against him, now I don't know his full name, Dylan something or other. Most people will remember him as Hornswoggle from WWE. He literally pointed out, and justly, I might add, that Peter Dinklage ruined it for everybody else. There are dwarf characters out there that could easily be played by people with dwarfism. Why they're not getting those roles now? Peter Dinklage's comments are a big part of it. So again, this is on him. I do think he needs to come out and apologize to the dwarf community. I think he needs to apologize to Hollywood in general, as well as the movie-going audience in general. Because again, he got his, and then he pulled up the ladder behind him. So take that as you will. By the way, for those of you wondering where the droning has stopped, I've just turned off the fans. Anyway, let me again remind you, this is a guy who rose to prominence in Game of Thrones. This is a guy who played in a Marvel movie. He's played in two of them, actually. He's played in Days of Future Past, and he's played in, I believe it's Infinity War, from the Avengers series of films. So he's been in two major productions involving Marvel characters, and he, of course, made his name on Game of Thrones as Tyrion Lannister, a character whose entire backstory revolves around the fact that he's a dwarf. I'm like, good Lord. Now, to be fair, they have had to make certain changes to dwarf proportions for stuff like, for example, the Middle-earth sequence. Because the dwarves are a little bit taller, I think, in the world of Tolkien's Middle-earth. Where, like, the hobbits are around 3.5 to 4 feet tall, dwarves go around 4.5 to 5 feet tall. So they're similar in size to hobbits in the original animated Hobbit film by Rankin Bass, and that might also be true in the animated films they did back in the day for The Lord of the Rings. I think Gimli and Thorin's company of 12 dwarves are a little taller than the hobbits in the live-action Middle-earth sequence by Peter Jackson, but I'm not entirely sure. They're at least around a similar enough height that they don't have a problem, entering a hobbit hole with room to spare. So again, I'm not exactly... The hobbits in The Two Towers, Gimli, Aragorn, and Legolas, when they encounter the Riders of Rohan, They say that the hobbits would appear no larger than children. So there's that. So they're basically supposed to be, regularly proportioned individuals, just small. Same thing with the dwarves. But with the dwarves of Snow White, dwarf actors would have been perfectly fine for this. And I think the same would have been true for most other dwarf roles in the modern day. Yeah. The one exception to this, I think, would have been Middle-earth, just because, it was going to be a little bit different of a setting. Everything else perfectly should work, I would think, but, that's just me. In any case, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, again, skip it, boycott it, ignore it exists if you can. I agree with Piers Morgan, with Nerdrotic, Critical Drinker, Esther. These guys have it, on the right side of this whole debate. You got James Barr, who they call him a comedian. I personally never once laughed at a thing this man has said. And I'm sorry, the man just does not seem to understand why there's a problem with him basically going, it's okay for Peter Dinklage to basically ruin things for other actors who are more diminutive in size. I'm sorry, James, this is a direct statement to you now. A lot of the things you have said in the various panels that you have been on really have just made me wonder if you're drinking a little too much of the Kool-Aid, metaphorically speaking, because you have been on the wrong side of every single argument so far that I have seen you in. You were wrong about Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. You're wrong about James Bond. Yes, that came up in the most recent thing here. And in general, you have been wrong about a lot of the things that have been discussed on the panel that you sometimes share with Piers Morgan. Personally, I'd love to talk to you on a panel with Piers Morgan, but I don't think we'd ever really change each other's mind. Hey, Piers, this is just putting it out there. Hey, you want me to come on to the show? Well, I don't expect you'll ever actually see this video or listen to it, but hey, you want me on? I'll come on. But, no. I'm in agreement with Critical Drinker, Nerdrotic, Piers Morgan, Esther, and of course, my friends over at Midnight's Edge. Because, again, we're all saying the same thing, and James is the only one saying something different. He's talking about doing things for modern audiences. The so-called modern audience that you think would appreciate this doesn't really exist. How do we know this? Because things like this keep failing. They're trying to do it with Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It's gonna fail. They've tried to do this with a lot of the material that Disney's been putting out. There's a reason why a lot of what Disney's been putting out has been flopping. Because they're trying to chase an audience that doesn't really exist. If that audience does exist, it's in such small numbers that they are completely overshadowed by the rest of the audience, and the rest of the audience feel alienated because in the attempt to be quote-unquote inclusive, Disney movies, in fact a lot of movies in recent years, and TV shows and animated projects and cartoons and comics have been exclusive and have alienated the audience they already had. I can think of no place more obvious where this can be seen than with Star Wars. Star Wars was always an inclusive series of films and shows and whatever else. Star Trek was also always inclusive. And yet, they have managed to drive away the audience, for the most part, on both of these franchises. They've done it with Marvel as well. Marvel was always inclusive. The problem is, when you try to pander specifically to a niche section of the audience, and an extremely small audience that you call a quote-unquote modern audience, and basically then accuse everybody else who doesn't watch your show or criticizes the writing or the pandering or whatever, the response we've heard is, well, you're just bigots. You're just this. You're just that. You hate women. You hate black people. You hate, gay people, whatever. No. We hate forced bullshit. We hate the idea that you seem to think that diversity and inclusion is a recent invention in Hollywood. It's not. It really hasn't been anything new for the last 45, maybe 50 years. We've had diverse and inclusive casting. But now we've had exclusionary casting. There was literally a Disney executive who has stated that there are shows and projects and even people applying to work at the company who will be ignored, passed over, because they don't have the right skin color, or they don't have the right sexual orientation, or they don't have the right political views. Disney has literally gone from let's make money, keep ourselves afloat, and entertain everybody to let's pursue the golden dragon of the mythical audience and then blame the rest of the audience that we've alienated when they don't watch our shows, or worse, they watch our material and then refuse to praise us for it. I'm sorry, James, I know you're a gay man. That's fine. I'm a straight man. Okay? I'm also multiply disabled, mixed race, and Jewish. Specifically, I am Jewish by ethnicity, by race. On one side of my family, I have been bar mitzvahed, for those of you who are going to try to bring up that argument, by the way. But I have a little bit of everything in me, for the most part, or at least a good chunk, anyway. I'm not exactly sure of my full genetic composition, or, for that matter, ancestral composition. But either way, James, diversity is not your shield from criticism. Being gay is not a shield from criticism. Being black is not a shield from criticism. Being Hispanic is not a shield from criticism. Being Asian is not a shield from criticism. And before anybody brings it up, being Jewish or Muslim or Christian, not that this is ever an issue with, people attacking Christians, but that is also not a shield from criticism. This, by the way, brings me right back to Rachel Ziegler literally making a comment about free Palestine. I'm sorry, first off, Palestine never officially existed as a state, number one. Number two, let's remember, Gal Gadot is Israeli and Jewish, I believe. Way to basically be racist to your co-star, asshole. But anyway, getting back to you again, James. This is not something you want to try to use to hide behind, because all it makes you do is it makes you look weak. When people complain about something being changed in a way that doesn't fit the character, Luke Skywalker, James Bond, Indiana Jones, for example. Hell, Sam Wilson, the Falcon. Yes, they made him Captain America for a while in the comics, but it was never a good fit. Not because he was black, but because he already had his own identity. He didn't need to be Captain America. He'd established the Falcon. He had made himself a name. He had made himself a reputation. He was an Avenger, for God's sake. He didn't need to be Captain America in the comics or the films. And now, like, I can't even call him Captain America because I keep thinking of him as the Falcon, because that's his original character. That's who he is. That's his original character. That's his original costumed identity. Now, if you want to call him Captain Falcon, well, I guess you really can't because Nintendo owns the copyright for that. But hey, next step, call him Falcon America, but not Captain America. Steve Rogers is Captain America. Isaiah Bradley could have been Captain America. Isaiah Bradley, I think that's the name of the guy I'm thinking of, was the first success story for a prototype of the super soldier serum. You basically bring him out of mothballs, say he was trapped in suspended animation, make him Captain America, and yes, Isaiah was black, by the way. Hell, I'd be fine with it. But Sam Wilson, he didn't need to be Captain America because he was already the Falcon. He already had his own personal identity and his own costumed identity that he had built on his own. Now it just feels like he's leeching off of, Steve Rogers. If anything, I would have said, really follow the comics and give the shield to Bucky if you're not going to bring in Isaiah Bradley. Because again, the Winter Soldier is kind of a negative connotation as a character right now in the MCU. Have him become the new Captain America. After all, Bucky Barnes was known as part of the United States military. I think if he got the nod from Steve Rogers, they would have taken him gladly as the new Captain America. But either way, a lot of people will resort to, oh, you hate women if you didn't like this show. Oh, you hate black people if you didn't like this show. No, it has nothing to do with skin color. It has nothing to do with orientation. Unless you're literally forcing it down people's throats, people aren't going to worry about it. This is why Doctor Who is kind of, on the outs. Because they've done nothing but play identity politics. And you do it all the time, James. And when people speak out against identity politics, because it's alienating people, they're called bigots. And it's like, no, they're not bigoted. They're using common sense and they're saying what everybody else is thinking. The only people who think identity politics is a good thing are people who believe that they are current year and that they are the quote-unquote modern audience that the entertainment industry should want. And it's not working because their numbers are not only too few, they're alienating everybody else. Hollywood is in dire straits right now because they are, by and large, making movies that few people actually like. Disney has had a string of flops in the last couple of years because they're making films nobody wants, nobody asked for, nobody liked. Lucasfilm is on the skids because of what they've done to Star Wars. I'm sorry, The Acolyte, from what I've been led to understand, is one of the worst things they've ever put out in the Star Wars universe. Now, you're going to say, oh, that just means you hate women, or you hate black people, or you hate gay people. No. Leslie Headland wrote a story that is a Leslie Headland story, not a Star Wars story. She also broke established lore to do this. And I'm sorry, the other problem is, the idea was, we're going to show that there are shades of gray and that the Jedi could be the bad guys. Except from everything I've heard, they didn't do that. If anything, it proved that I forget what the hell the group is called, but apparently they were dark side users, were flat out evil, committed multiple murders, mind raped at least one teenage boy, and we're supposed to think the Jedi are the bad guys in this? I'm sorry, what? Yeah, again, Leslie Headland may be gay, but that doesn't make her a good story writer for the series, because she clearly doesn't know anything about the lore of Star Wars. Even if she took a crash course in it, she clearly failed the course. Because again, people who are much more in tune with the Star Wars fandom than I am. Now, this is people like Midnight's Edge, this is people like Clownfish TV, Nerdrotic, Critical Drinker. They probably know that lore backwards and forwards. There are certain things I know backwards and forwards. Star Wars really isn't one of them, outside of the original 6 films and a little bit of the animated Clone Wars stuff. Not a hell of a lot. These guys could run rings around me when it comes to Star Wars, I'm pretty sure. To be fair, when it comes to Godzilla, I could probably run circles around them, but, you know, that's neither here nor there, and it's more apples to oranges anyway. But again, you keep acting like commenting on anything is somehow an attack on gay people or black people or brown people or whatever. James, for the love of God, pull your head out of your ass, please. This is not about hating people for being different. This is about hating bad writing and literally alienating the audiences. Why do you think games like Black Myth Wukong are doing well? They eschew politics. They're just there to entertain. People are sick of dealing with politics and the troubles and tribulations of the real world. When they go to their entertainment, they want to escape from the troubles of the real world. They want to escape from politics. They want to dive into a world where they can watch people do things that they wish they could do. They want to see a Superman that they can aspire to. They want to see a Spider-Man that they can cheer for. They want to see anybody of any color, of any sexuality, do something that entertains them, not preaches to them, browbeats them, or reminds them of the bullshit they got to deal with in their everyday lives. This is just the point where you fail to understand why people do not like the things that you like. You like them? Hey, fine, you're okay to like them, but do not browbeat people for saying, we don't like this and here's why. Because all you do is you use straw man arguments that have no basis in the real world and have no connection to reality. I'm sorry, this is not why people don't like these things. This is not why people will push back on you on the idea of, why can't James Bond be gay? Because he wasn't written as gay. He was written as heterosexual. I see this a lot in, the fan fiction writing community. And again, that's fan fiction, so that's fine. But I'm sorry, James, just because you think somebody should be gay doesn't mean they should be gay. Just because you think somebody could be gay doesn't mean they have to be. And just because people don't like something like Star Wars The Acolyte or Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs remake or whatever does not mean that they hate people who are different in appearance or orientation from them. They don't like the material because it bores them, because it panders to a specific group while preaching to others, and shames them for simply liking things that they have enjoyed all their lives. You and other people, whether it be the Mary Sue or any of the other so-called friendly media, when it comes to Hollywood, don't get this. They're starting to wake up and get away from the wokeness. They're getting away from, people are just bigots because they didn't praise our stuff to the heavens and instead they found things wrong with it. No, they're starting to admit that the reason why these things are flopping is because you've alienated the audience. All right? Now, I'm not just speaking to James here now. I'm speaking to everybody. But James, again, do listen in. The Acolyte is the lowest rated Star Wars production that Disney Plus has put on the air. This thing cost several hundred thousand, I think, per minute. So we're talking like several $100 million. From what little I've seen of the footage on the trailers, it looks cheap as hell. The screen captures I've seen don't impress me. The story I've heard from various people who've reviewed it look like crap. To be, anybody who's seen anything to do with the original Star Wars films or even read the original novels. I won't touch, for the most part, the new Star Wars Expanded Universe because it's garbage. Why do I know that it's garbage? Because I've seen at least one book from the new Star Wars novels, and I hated it. I watched the first movie of the Disney trilogy, hate it with a passion. I saw a little bit of The Last Jedi, I forget exactly where, but it made me so violently angry at what they had done to Luke Skywalker that I officially said, yeah, Disney Star Wars, or rather Disney Wars, is dead on arrival. I'm sorry. Trying to preach to your audience just drives away your audience. If you want to have a message, keep it very subtle and keep your words soft and sweet because you may have to eat them, if I may quote Jerry the King Lawler. Getting back to the Acolyte, or as one of my friends over at Midnight's Edge likes to call it, the Activist. The reason why that thing was canceled isn't because people hated that the lead was black or that there were quote-unquote lesbian space witches. It's because they had already been so badly burned on everything else that had happened in Star Wars in the last roughly 10 years that the audience that used to be there for Star Wars, the audience that kept that franchise alive for nearly 50 goddamn years, has tuned out. They don't care anymore because it has gotten so far away from what Star Wars is, whether it be on the big screen, the small screen, the video game screen, or the original novels and comics, that the original fans don't want anything to do with it. And even the people who are rushing to defend it and scream bigotry was the reason why it was canceled didn't tune in to watch it. Even the people who supposedly hate watched it, and maybe there are people who did hate watch it, are still the only audience that you actually had. You had the smallest audience possible for the Acolyte because you'd driven the rest of the audience away. So what are you expecting here? If you're expecting universal praise, you're not going to get it. And if you're expecting massive audiences, when you alienate, browbeat, shame, and in general castigate people for being white or for being straight or for being a man, well, guess what? You're going to drive that part of your audience away, except for the masochists who would rather torture themselves, whether it be physical or metaphorical self-flagellation, because they've been brainwashed into thinking there's something wrong with them for being male, for being straight, or God forbid, being white. And you're going to get fewer and fewer returns on your investment. We're already seeing it with Star Wars. We've started to see it with Marvel. Most of Disney's direct releases have seen this. Look at the stuff that was successful in the last couple of years. Deadpool and Wolverine. No politics. No identity politics. No browbeating people for being old school comic book fans. It's killing it at the box office. You look at the Super Mario Brothers movie. It made bank. They tried to girl boss Peach a little bit, but overall it wasn't egregious. And the movie made good. Look at Godzilla. The Monsterverse stares away from identity politics for the most part. I mean, there was a little bit of it in the New Empire, but so minuscule that you can ignore it. And again, these movies make money because they are giving the audience, for the most part, what they want. I personally want to see more Godzilla in a movie where Godzilla has top goddamn billing. But again, that's just me. Hell, look at Godzilla -1. This thing was politically charged. But it wasn't pandering. It didn't browbeat people for being white or, God forbid, American or straight or male. And that thing is one of the biggest success stories of this past year. All you got to do is give people what they want. All right? Give them the bacon. Give them the meat. Give them, in the case for those who want it, the potatoes. Again, give them what they want. Give them what they expect, even if you're giving it to them in a new way. And they'll come and see it. They'll give you the ratings. They'll give you the box office. They'll give you the sales on the video games or the comics or the novels or what have you. You're not giving the audience what they want. You're telling the audience what they should like. And when they don't agree with you, you call them bigots. You call them this. You call them that. And you expect them to like it. You expect them to take it. And I'm sorry, that's never going to happen. It's never going to work because you need them. They don't need you. How do we know they don't need you? They are tuning out. They are staying away from the box office in droves. They're staying away from the comics en masse. Literally, Skybound, which is, I believe it's an imprint of Image Comics, right? Their Transformers comics right now are outselling everything put out by DC Comics and presumably Marvel. One book is outselling the big two. Japanese manga is outselling almost every American comic book publisher in the goddamn industry because they're not trying to preach to you. They're not trying to browbeat you. They're not trying to castigate you. They're not trying to exclude you from enjoying the stories. Anime is the same way. They are there to entertain. They know that. They stick with that. And people are enjoying the stories in anime, in manga, and in Skybound's Transformers, the so-called Energon universe, which includes motherfucking G.I. Joe. All right? Again, Skybound is outselling everything with one book that DC has put out, that Marvel has put out. One book is outselling the big two. Do you get the message, people? And I'm talking to everybody in the mass media, whether it be video games, movies, cartoons, live-action TV, animated film, comic books, or even, yes, idiotic so-called comedians like James Barr. Do you get it? Give the people what they want, and they will come see it. They will buy it. They will consume it. If you play politics and scream bigotry when you don't get the universal praise and acceptance that you think you want from anything you put out there, all you're going to do is drive those people away even further, and you're going to create more problems than you're solving. Yes, this was rambly. Yes, I basically spent the last hour and 30-odd minutes just ranting into the dark. I don't care. This needed to be said. It has been said. Deal with it! Folks, this has been Warwolf, and I'm out.